This is Euronews Now. I'm Helena Humphrey. Here are your top stories. French President Emmanuel Macron has pledged European solidarity, saying the country's ready to deliver gas to Germany as tensions with Russian supply escalate. Shelling at Ukraine's Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant has caused a fire, shutting down the last working reactor just hours before the UN's atomic watchdog releases its report. And Boris Johnson bids farewell as British Prime Minister before Liz Truss takes over. He says he's fulfilled the role and pledged support for the new leader.
French residents are being called on to reduce energy use in the coming months to avoid the risk of rationing and cuts this winter. The warning comes at a time of fresh tensions with Russia over gas supplies. President Emmanuel Macron says a voluntary effort is needed, but plans are being prepared just in case.
If we collectively behave more soberly and save energy elsewhere, then there will be no rationing and there will be no power cuts. The objective is that if we have a very cold winter, if European solidarity is called for, we can go through it if we know how to save around 10% of energy.
France says it's ready to deliver gas to Germany this coming winter, in a show of European solidarity should the gas squeeze make such a move necessary. EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen tweeted saying that the Russian president is using energy as a weapon and manipulating the market, adding that the bloc is preparing proposals to help vulnerable households and businesses cope with high energy prices, while supporting electricity producers facing liquidity challenges. In a policy U-turn, Germany, one of the bloc's members most dependent on Russian gas supplies, says it's keeping 2 nuclear plants on standby beyond the end of the year.
For me, the right conclusion to draw from this stress test is that we should keep this option after the end of the normal life of nuclear power plants, and that we should put the other 2 nuclear power plants in southern Germany in reserve so that they can be used again or continue to be used if the situation requires it, and that we do not deprive ourselves of this option.
While Europe blames Russia's war in Ukraine for the energy crisis, the Kremlin says Western sanctions are the sole reason behind the decision to shut the Nord Stream 1 pipeline, as it can't get the maintenance parts.
Well, it was a fairly surprising announcement by the German Energy Minister Robert Habeck. The expectation was that he would come out and say that because of the current energy situation, because of the Russian invasion of Ukraine and because of the lack of gas, Germany would keep 2 out of its remaining 3 nuclear power plants operational beyond the planned shutdown date at the end of this year. However, that's not what he announced. He announced that these 2 power plants will be kept as a reserve, but they will be disconnected from the grid, and he implied that they will only be used if absolutely necessary. Now, this might be a difficult thing for Germany to now explain to its neighbors. Everyone within the EU is being asked to save as much energy as possible, and Germany's plan is now to keep 2 nuclear power plants operational, or at least ready to be operational, but unused unless absolutely necessary. And that might be a difficult thing to explain to countries like Poland and the Czech Republic and France, but also to large portions of the German population. Jonah Kellgren, Euronews, Berlin.
The final working reactor block of the Russian-occupied Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant in southeast Ukraine has been disconnected. It's after Russian shelling disrupted power lines, according to Ukraine's state energy operator. Occupation authorities in Enerhodar say Ukrainians have bombarded the station again. French President Emmanuel Macron talked with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and stated that Russian troops need to withdraw immediately. 4 of the International Atomic Energy Agency mission members at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant have left its territory. However, 2 of them will remain on a permanent basis. The Kremlin, meanwhile, warned that Russia will not resume gas supplies to Europe until Western sanctions are lifted, blaming the, quote, collective West for its decision to shut down flows to the Nord Stream 1 pipeline. The move stoked renewed fears about shortages and gas rationing in the EU this winter, and has sent European gas prices rocketing as much as 30% on Monday. According to Russian-appointed deputy of the Kherson region, Kirill Stremusov, they are pausing a planned referendum on whether to become part of Russia because of sustained attacks by Ukrainian forces.
A court in Moscow on Monday jailed a journalist for 22 years in a maximum security prison on charges of treason after a trial widely seen as politically motivated. The sentence handed down to Ivan Savronov is one of the harshest blows dealt to independent journalists and Kremlin critics in Russia. Savronov worked as a defence and space reporter for Kommersant's newspaper for a decade before becoming an advisor to the head of the Russian space corporation Roscosmos. I can't call this sentence anything but inadequate. Hackneyed words like unlawful and unjust can't reflect all the absurdity that's happened today and which we've all witnessed. Ivan Savronov was given 22 years for his journalism work. I want every one of you Russian journalists looking at me now to think about whether it's worth going on with this profession if a person's given 22 years for doing his job. Savronov was accused of passing military secrets to Czech intelligence and information about the Russian military to a German national. He insists on his innocence and argued that he collected all the information from open sources in the course of his work and did nothing illegal.
The lack of obstetricians in public hospitals throughout Portugal has forced some maternity hospitals to close permanently. The task force president for emergency obstetrics and mother and child care doesn't see any other solution in the short term. The task force was created in June to tackle this crisis that is forcing pregnant women to travel much further to deliver their children.
We've been working during the months of July and August on a reorganisation of obstetrics and gynecology and neonatal care. We think that this will probably affect the concentration of resources. That is, that some hospitals cannot keep their emergency and their delivery blocks open.
Some Portuguese hospitals had to close their obstetrics and gynecology emergencies several times this summer due to a lack of doctors. During this crisis, 2 babies died and a pregnant woman died as well while being transferred to another hospital due to the lack of vacancies in neonatology. The deaths are being investigated. The Minister of Health has resigned. According to Diogo Aires de Campos, the National Health Service needs to be reinforced with around 200 specialists in obstetrics and gynecology. In the last few years, maternal mortality has increased in Portugal to its highest rate in 38 years. Is this connected with the lack of doctors?
The problem doesn't seem to be the response. At least it's not evident that it has to do with the response. But it has to do with the increase in pregnancies of women who come from other countries, often countries with fewer economic resources, who decide to deliver in Portugal.
Aires de Campos also says that the report on maternal mortality underlines that there are now more women with diseases deciding to become pregnant.
Stay with us, we've got plenty more on the way after a short break. See you then.